Martin from the Historical Society, and she is going to tell us everything she knows about the ghosts in Cohasset. Pat, but before she starts, I want to thank the Friends of the Library for making the cake.
Yes.
It's all yours.
All right, well, thank you for having me. Apparently, these are the bravest people in Cohasset. So I'm glad you showed up. Now I can make a mental note of who you are in case I need you in the future. But we're here tonight to talk about some of the spooky ghosts that live among us in Cohasset. I want to talk about not telling ghost stories, but really about ghostly encounters that I have experienced in Cohasset, others have shared with me, and those that are on record. Just give you a little background about myself. I'm a member of the Cohasset Historical Society. Anytime anybody says about ghosts, they say, oh, there's that one crazy woman, Pat Martin. So she'll come out and talk about anything. But that's how I kind of got started in the position, because in 2008, we got a request that for the Cohasset Town Hall to be investigated by a scientific team of paranormal investigators, and they wanted to come in and do 48 hours overnight, 2 overnights, and the selectmen were like, well, we've heard it's haunted, and we've heard all about these ghosts, and yeah, there's this team, and they look pretty legit, but who would be willing to spend 2 nights overnight in Cohasset? So they called me up, and for me it was kind of like a lifelong juxtaposition of who I was and what I believed and what I was trying to figure out in my life. And they came in, maybe you all remember this. This is a long time ago, but it hit the front page and it went around the country. And that kind of formed my second or third life or reputation of who I am. In 2009, I was appointed ceremoniously, half with a tongue in the cheek, as the keeper of the ghosts in Cohasset in 2009 by former Selectman Ralph Dormitzer. But anyway, let me just give you a little bit of background of kind of where I came from and then how I got involved and then what I've seen and why you should maybe believe what you see or take into account what is going on in Cohasset. It's a great night. I just want to mention, I don't know how many people know, but tonight was kind of a spooky night. The wind's blowing and the leaves are going, but how many people know what the anniversary of tonight is? Okay, we'll get to that later. It's a very significant ghostly night tonight, which I thought is the reason that you pulled me in, but we'll talk about that in a little while. I see Herb. Herb was on an investigation with me once. We had a lot of fun. That was after we had the fire department come out and almost shut us down because some smoke got into the air. But anyway, so I come from a very old family. I come from parents that are historians and travelers, old family in that when I was a kid, my parents were always dragging me off to a cemetery and say, oh, we're gonna go find somebody from like 1790. You know, they pull me into a cemetery and we have a picnic and that kind of thing. My father had a kind of a crazy life. He lived very isolated in a spot in Vermont, south of Rutland on a lake called Lake St. Catherine, and his family owned this old inn that was haunted. And I think that my father was spooked about it, and that the fact that he saw a lot of drowning and washing up and bears and that kind of stuff made him very sensitive to ghosts. So he was always, as they say, passing along his fears to me. You know, you learn your anxieties and your fears from your parents. But also too, as I've always said when people talk to me, there's, in my belief, 2 types of people. There's the normal people and there's the paranormal people. And paranormal people are folks who are a little bit more sensitive. You know, it used to be that we got classified into this group of crazy people, but I think now as science is starting to show stuff like the hypersensitive, empathetic nervous system, where people can feel more than others can feel, that people who have long histories can feel the genetic memories of some of the stuff that they're relatives have understood. And being an empath, you're either, if you're very empathetic, you can feel a lot of the moods of another person. You can feel the struggling of people. If you're one of those folks out there who doesn't want to see an animal suffer, doesn't want to watch a television show where somebody's getting tortured or murdered, you might be empathetic because you just feel that suffering. And so empaths are more likely to kind of pick up on, oh my God, that happened, and oh, that's kind of spooky, and you can just kind of feel it. And when people ask me, how do you see a ghost? I don't really see a ghost, I kind of feel a ghost. For me, it was always a situation where I thought somebody was in my house. I thought somebody was around the corner, and I react that way. When I first moved to Cohasset, I had a spooky house that had a guy in it, and one time he decided to, well, my husband was aware, I was probably pretty scared. I was a young bride, I had 3 kids, I live in a weird 3-level house, so I was on the basement, then it's like a split level. My bedroom was down here, here's the living space, and my kids were up here. My husband was away, I didn't like when he went away, so I tried to sleep with the light on and all those kind of things. But anyway, I fell asleep with the light on, and this thing whistled in my ear, and when I woke up, I figured it was outside my bedroom. So of course I thought, oh, he's just waiting, you know, I scared him when I screamed, he's out there, he's gonna get me. I couldn't get out of the bedroom, I finally ran up the stairs, I tried to get a hold of my husband, but there was nothing there. There was never anything there. So that was the kind of things like, well, what the heck happened, you know? Must have been a ghost, because I'm pretty sure I felt something, I woke up, but they're not there. So those were always kind of the experiences I had. But anyway, how do you know that you saw a ghost is what people say to me a lot of times. And I don't know, you may be feeling them. I say you feel them, you don't see them. For me, I kind of just get a feeling that they're around, or I can see things. What happened for me was that I was able to kind of get validated with what I thought was, well, you know, that's your imagination. My dad used to always say, you know, you got a crazy imagination, you know, just stop being that way. But anyway, not too long ago, well, I shouldn't say not too long ago, as old as the dirt now, but anyway, I was in Newport, Rhode Island with my husband. My husband's from Newport, Rhode Island, which is a very haunted city. If you've ever been to Newport, a lot of fun. Probably haunted a lot because they've done a great job of keeping historical places intact. But anyway, so I was having dinner at one of my favorite restaurants, which is the White Horse Tavern. Has anybody ever been there? It's supposedly the oldest tavern in the United States. And anyway, I was having dinner. No, I was waiting. My husband was parking the car, and I was sitting, and I saw this staircase that's really small, if you know it, and underneath it is a closet, and I thought, there's a little girl there with a kerchief on her hair, and she works here, and because I had heard that it was a family-owned type of operation, and that's how it was back in the day. The kids worked for, you know, nothing to make their families successful. So I thought, why am I getting this feeling about it? But anyway, a couple days later, I'm hanging out in Newport. It's like, oh, there's a new ghost tour. So I think, well, I'll go on the ghost tour in Cohasset. So I'm going on the ghost tour, and they're talking about different things, which was great because ghost tours do a lot of history, so if you don't believe in the spooky stuff, you get a lot of history stuff, pirates and stuff down there, hangings and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, so we walk through the city, you know, they got the guy with the light, you know, it's all crazy. And they get to the end of the tour and they go, okay, so here's the White Horse Tavern. So this is a very haunted space in in Newport. They said, you know, Gourmet magazine came out to do a spread on the White Horse Tavern. And while they were there, the photographer captured this ghost on film, and they pulled up the photograph, and there was the girl that I'd seen the night before. So there she was with the kerchief. I was like, oh, okay, all right. So, yeah, so I got some real stuff going on. And that's what happened to me in Cohasset. I landed here. I'm originally from Connecticut. I lived in New Jersey. That's why I got this crazy accent. People are like, where are you from? It's like Mars. But anyway, so I come to Cohasset. I get on the school committee. That's a whole nother story. But anyway, we're going to do a presentation at Cohasset Town Hall. I'd never been there before. So we have to go in there. In Cohasset, I love this town. I just love this town to death. Somebody says, oh, you having a presentation? Come on down, get the key. So you get, they'll give you the key to Cohasset town anytime you want to. So, okay, go in and set up. So I go into the main place there where the old town hall is, because in case you don't know, if you haven't been following your town hall renovation politics, people, there's 3 different expansions over there, but I'm in the old place where the stage is, and my husband comes in, and we have to set up our own chairs and everything, and I'm talking to my husband, I said, oh, they said that there are chairs over in this corner, and I go, I don't want to go anywhere near that corner. What is going on with that corner? My husband's like, I don't know. Creep city in this one corner. How many people, do you know the town hall?
Yeah.
So if you walk in, if you walk in and vote, right? So on this side, which is the left, there's a little doorway, but hidden around there is a giant safe. So it's nuts. And that's, they put the chairs in the safe, right? So it's like, okay, so my mind was blown. Okay, there's a safe over here, there's something creepy here, there's some chairs, it's dark, it's windy, all sorts of going on. But anyway, so I never liked Cohasset Town Hall. And then, sure enough, I got invited to do the tour with the paranormal investigators. What was great about the paranormal investigators is they traveled with a variety of different, what you want to call team members who were scientific psychics, mediums, people who were running infrared cameras, people who were moving, using movement detectors. They had cameras all over the place. We have these other crazy devices like infrared, temperature readings, we have ghost boxes, we have all these different stuff. But anyway, one of the psychics recognized, she said, you know, there's a guy in here and he hangs around in that closet. And there's the belief that ghosts travel inside different, like they travel through staircases, they travel through portholes. And what we came to find out in Cohasset is there's, what, 5? Is it 5? There's 5 safes stacked on top of each other. So this, and on the bottom of the safe, in the basement in Cohasset, if you don't know, is a jail cell. Has anybody ever seen the jail, the old jail in Cohasset? Creepy as all heck. When I was on the town hall renovation, I was like, I don't care what you do in town hall, but you have to preserve the jail, okay? Because there's a ghost in there. And you're like, Pat, you. Okay, you can be, yeah, whatever. But anyway, it's historical and it's crazy. And you know, and like again, going back to the history, you can just imagine people getting taken down there and locked into that town hall and left to whatever. But anyway, so that was what was going on there. But anyway. So that started the first thing, which we can talk a little bit more about those ghosts, because there is a ghost. There's the prisoner who has been reported to hang himself. He was a very poor person. He also, too, I saw in my mind, and I got a validation, strangely enough, because I'd always kind of seen him and in my head, and then one day, I used to work for 143 TV. Hi, 143 TV, they're here tonight. In fact, I started the studio and put it in the high school afterwards, after I did the television show. But anyway, I used to have a little television show called Our Town, which with Mark DiGiacomo, back in the olden days when there wasn't like immediate technology. We had a little show to present both sides of political issues in Cohasset, because you only had a newspaper that came out once a week. So there'd be a big argument, it would be, oh, for this, for this, for this, and then you'd have to wait a week, and it'd be, oh, and so it'd be like 3 weeks, and you'd be like, I don't know what's going on, I don't know how to believe, what to believe. So we did a little television show where we would pull both sides in, and we would sit down. But anyway, and I forgot what was I gonna say, but anyway, Jesus, what was I gonna say? All right. Well, anyway, that is...
The guy who hung himself.
Oh, the guy who hung himself. Okay, so I had this little TV show, and I would have to put fillers in because we would bring the person who was going to talk for an issue on, and we'd have to take a break. So I went out, and I do a little photography. That's mostly where I capture my ghosts. And at the time, they were doing those posters where they had doorways of Galway and doorways of Newport. So I decided to do doorways of Cohasset. Put it in there, started looking at it, looked at the doorway in Cohasset Town Hall, and there was the ghost. So I've had that published. I don't have a picture of him because I only have the one picture, that's why I don't have, but I can pass this around, see if you can see him. He's in there, and that's exactly what he looks like. It's pretty creepy. I'll show it to you afterwards, because a lot of people can't see it.
What is that book?
This book was by a friend of mine. This guy works with Jeff Bellinger, if you know Jeff. This is Chris Balzano. So he was trying to follow in Jeff's footprints, because Jeff's doing really well these days. He's selling calendars and doing 195 presentations around the country and selling books and everything. So Chris works with him as a paranormal investigator, so Chris was kind of following in on his stuff. But I'm in here for a couple things, this and another photograph that I took, which I'll explain in a little bit. But anyway, so you've got Cohasset Town Hall, which is really haunted. In the investigations, we went around the tri-state area, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut. I can talk about some of those stuff. If you want to do some of your own fun, I always say, go into Cohasset Town Hall, walk around, see what you feel. Because there's another ghost in Cohasset Town Hall. It's very interactive. And I hate to give it away, but we, twice the Historical Society, we had haunted happenings, and we would take tours in there. But if you go into the old section, go up the staircase and walk through the old section, you might have some fun. And then give me a call, I'll tell you what it is. But I tell you, it's pretty spooky stuff. We also just getting into some other ghost experiences. After that, I was doing a variety of different things. I'd get called into people's homes, but I did a fundraiser, and one of the most active ghosts that I've ever seen is right over here across the street. How many people know about the house over here that is falling into disrepair?
It's a hospital.
It was a hospital, that's exactly right. It was the Ripley Road Hospital. So it, actually, you know, the true definition, in case you don't know, this is where I'll separate locals from counties. So if you weren't born in Cohasset, you're not a town. And to be born in Cohasset doesn't mean you were born in Weymouth at this Hauser Hospital. It means you were born at Ripley Road Hospital, right? And I think it closed, or it transitioned back around 1960 when the state said, okay, you know, we've got to have some regulations. You can't have these homegrown hospitals. It became a nursing home, and then it fell into disrepair. But I got to do a fundraiser back in there for the basketball team, and in that building is a really spooky, scary, angry ghost that slams doors and turns lights off. And it's my feeling that that building has never gotten anywhere because the ghost doesn't want you messing around with it. Same thing with Cohasset Town Hall. You know, and there is a theory that ghosts will take the possession of a place, you know, this is where they live, so they don't want you messing with it. So if you come along and try to renovate it, they get all uptight and they try to scare you out of there and do all sorts of stuff like that. So, but that building, I hate to see it go. I know that the bank has taken it. They took it through foreclosure. Yeah, I don't know who's bought it. I know the previous owner. I don't know where he is now, but, so I hope they don't flatten it, but it's huge and it's full of asbestos, I think. The giant furnaces don't work and stuff, so it'll be kind of a shame, but it was a really cool building. But anyway, okay, so that's one of the ghosts in here. The other ghost, there's a ghost that I was involved in because of a personal relationship I have. I don't like to talk about where the location of the house is because it was a historical place, and then it was transitioned into a residential home, and there are people in there, there's family in there. But the first family that moved in there after it transitioned from museum to a personal home had a son who was dying of cancer, who was a very, very good friend of mine and my kids. And at the time, this house is crazy, which is like there's so many houses in Cohasset, has hidden staircases. It's a very square house, and so coming up out of the basement where they used to cook, coming up to the corners where you can't even see are staircases that go up to the top. And there was always a presence there of a servant who was coming up from the basement and watching over the family. And I could feel it, but it was a difficult time for me. But the young man unfortunately passed away. That was 2006, but before he died, his hospice nurse told my good friend, oh, you know, the hospice nurse came in and said there's a presence in the house that comes up through the staircases and sits with him and holds his hand. So that, I don't know if they're still there. I don't think they're still there because I think ghosts move around a lot. He was another person that I saw first. He came to me on a mirror, and then he used to come to me and knock on the door on Halloween, and I opened the door, he wasn't there, and I didn't know he came to visit me. So that's one of the things. But anyway, so tonight, nobody knows about probably the biggest ghostly impact that has hit Cohasset. Happened 170 years ago tonight.
Was it the wreck of St. John?
The wreck of the brig St. John, 170 years ago. So by 7 o'clock, there was already 40 people that had washed up on the shore. So the brig St. John was an Irish famine coffin ship that came in as a gale was developing up here in the harbor. And it's a funny kind of story. And there's a couple, you know, the Historical Society has a little pamphlet, although their date is wrong. And then this book might be in the library. It was written by Paul Fiore, who's now a ghost himself. But anyway, it's a great book. It's got a lot. He was a great guy. Talks about this, has a lot of the historical newspaper stuff in it. But anyway, they took off from Galloway. They got around Cape Cod, and for some reason the weather was nice, so they were about to hit Boston the next day, so they decided to have a celebration.
Oh my God.
So they pulled out a whole bunch of booze and decided to drink it up and everything. And then, I don't know, you know how storms come. All of a sudden a big gale came, and they decided that they were gonna try to make it into Boston. And they got outside of Cohasset, dropped their anchors. The anchors didn't take, and they hit the Grampus ledge, and the bottom came out. And it was early in the morning, like when it was dark. So the Coast Guard, or the life-saving guys, led by Captain Lothrop, there's still a lane named after him. His daughter writes the accounting, the historical accounting of watching as the sun come up and seeing the brig St. John crashing into pieces, and the life-saving people trying to get out there. And then the week afterwards, when 99 bodies washed up in Cohasset. So it was awful, and a couple of things. Obviously, there were people in Boston who were Irish, who were waiting for their families to come. They heard of the wreck. There's a lot of newspaper things in here. So they started coming down by train, by carriage, by foot. And Cohasset became one of those early, I don't know, news gawking kind of things where there was hundreds of people on the green. And strangely enough, arriving in Cohasset on his famous trip from Boston to Cape Cod was Henry David Thoreau. And he ended up writing a book called Cape Cod. So he came to Cohasset. Just a great story, because Henry David Thoreau, who you know ended up going to Walden Ponds, right, living a life of isolation, had fallen in love with the daughter of a minister who ran the Congregational Church in Scituate. And he was a big Harvard grad, big, we were like the hotbed of Harvard religion back in the days. As you know, Cohasset and the Unitarian Church and the Congregational Church split because of the theory of Unitarianism, and forget the whole thing, whether there was a Trinity or there was one God or the Holy Ghost and all that sort of stuff. obviously I'm showing I haven't been to church in a while, sorry. Sorry about that. But anyway, so Henry David Thoreau was in love with a woman named Ellen Sewell, Reverend Robert Sewell in Situate, and she turned him down. She said, no, I can't marry you. My father doesn't like you. I think you don't have anything really going for you. You're a transcendentalist. You got a lot of great ideas. You haven't you haven't published any books or anything. So she turned him down. She ended up marrying the Reverend Joseph Osgood, right, at the elementary school. But anyway, so he's passing through. He thinks, you know what? I'm going to go to Cape Cod. I'm just going to swing by Cohasset and check out my old girlfriend. See if she's happy with Osgood. He was friends with Osgood too. He gets here and it's just a disaster. It's like a mess. And this will talk about it and this will talk about it. Just horrific with bodies washing in. They came in through Little Harbor. They washed up all along the shores. Some of them went to Hull. Some of them went to Cape Cod. It's just so horrible to hear that you just go to the beach and it'd be like, oh, there's a policy. And there's a body in it. But families, children, 99 people passed away. Something like only 12 people survived. And so there was a big funeral. Thoreau saw that. And then there's the mass grave where they put folks in the Central Cohasset Cemetery, which supposedly the location is still unknown. Paul talks about it being behind in somebody's house. He talks about it being close. For some reason, it was never recorded. A little bit of the politics. Cohasset took a lot of hits that, they didn't really care about the Irish people, blah, blah, but I think they were so traumatized that they weren't showing a lot of affection or emotion because, bodies were coming in on people's carriages, and so they did a massive grave. And I was out there today, and they're digging up out there, putting in a seawall. Does anybody know about what's happening there?
Yeah.
No. What are they doing?
They're raising it up so that when the tide comes in, they've raised some of the back graves up like this.
They haven't exhumed anything though, they're just raising.
Yeah, so they
they're
haven't
just
come
raising.
across anything? 'Cause
Where's
it was
this?
Crazy.
We're down at Joy, Simple Cemetery, Joy Place.
Okay.
Yeah, if you go, you go
Right down by the
through
harbor,
Joy
right
Place.
down the back.
Yeah, no, I know
of the
right here,
harbor, yeah.
right where you're at.
Yeah, so it was never marked. So when I saw that today, I thought, ooh, boy, I wonder what's happening with that. But anyway, so that's one of probably the biggest things. And when the two psychics that came with us to do the town hall, they end up trying to feel all sorts of stuff. They're getting all this information, and one of them kept saying, I don't know, there's just tons of zombie people on Cohasset Common. There's just I can't figure out what's going on, but there's something awful happened here. And I didn't even know at the time, so I ended up finding out afterwards. So she was kind of right on the money. So I get the feeling there's 99 people walking around Cohasset who thought they were going to come to Cohasset, start a new life. This disaster happened, and now they're walking around going, what the heck happened? Where am I? Where? They're lost, which a lot of ghosts can be. Which if you look into some of the theories, what causes a ghost? Somebody who died suddenly, somebody who doesn't really know what happened because it was so quick, and they're just kind of lost with the whole type of thing. So that's the biggest thing that's going on. And they have a beautiful grave, Celtic cross, and usually they do an anniversary with the Hibernians come out, I think. Have they come out this year? Did they come out today?
It's supposed to, it should be coming up then, because.
Yeah, they have the bagpipes.
Weekend, on Sunday, I think.
Yeah, so look for the local paper, not that we have one anymore, but, whether they have it or not, or maybe the town library here could tell you, but they usually have a ceremony, people walk from the town common over there and just remark about the terrible occasion that was, so. All right, a couple other stories. Of course, we've got the great story about Minot Light, right? And you all know about Minot Light. There was 2 Minot Lights. So because this is such a treacherous place to sail and come in, there've been a lot of wrecks. Plus, there was a kind of a nasty old trait that people used to do as a vocation. The moon cussers would build a fire and try to pretend it was like Boston Light, and they'd put it high up on like the shores of Situate or Marshfield or Hingham, and they would hope you'd be like, oh, there's the light, and you go and crash into like the shores. And maritime law allows you, or at that time, any wreckage was free to take, so they were like, yeah, this is great, whatever crashes we'll grab. And even in that, along those lines too, if you haven't been down to the Maritime Museum, there's a lot of artifacts from the Brig St. John, which give off a really creepy feeling. There's the captain's desk, which the story that Paul tells, somebody was walking on Sandy Beach and saw this beautiful little kind of tabletop desk, because they were designed to kind of take them with you. He saw a friend like sticking it in a bush, and then that guy ended up like paying off his house and getting like all new things, and they always figured it was full of gold, but it's down there now. So Maritime Museum is great. And the Maritime Museum itself was really the first location that was documented in Cohasset as an official ghostly spot. Back in the 50s, there was a very famous paranormal investigator, probably the most well-known. The first name was Hans Holzler.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And Hans Holzler traveled with Sybil at first, and then some other psychics. I'm not sure which one came, they never documented, but he came down because there'd been a lot of complaints that the Maritime Museum, which was originally a ship's chandelier that was down probably where the sailing center is now, they decided to move it on up as they expanded, and they dropped it in Cohasset, down where it's located now. And he was all mad about it, so they'd be having meetings and the ghosts would be stomping their feet up there. So they brought Hans out there, and they said, yeah, that's exactly what happened. He was unhappy, he couldn't look out the window anymore and see the channel and what was going on. So, but Hans Holzler, he's kind of a big deal. His show, well, I don't know if it was a TV show. No, he did a lot of writing, but he was followed by Leonard Nimoy, who did the same thing, you know, In Search of all these different things. So it was kind of significant. And then because of that, a lot of people started coming into Cohasset, people write about it. One of the big stories that people have always investigated is the West Corner Jerusalem house that's got the, it's not there anymore because they had to take the statue away because I think the last time somebody kidnapped it, it went somewhere. But if you go down, if you're heading towards West Corner, which is where the Corner Stop restaurant is, on the right is a house that actually was a beach, like a boathouse at the time. Now it's kind of fancy. It's got two, I shouldn't say pillars, but it's got, you know, like 8-foot cement things and a pathway and a terracotta roof. And then you can see the old remnants of the boathouse where they used to have like a stanchion and a rope and a stanchion and a rope. And there's a little pond there with one kind of like statue, but there used to be a little girl who they said was, what's her name, Alice in Wonderland, and that they would see things that were going, flitting around her and ghostly stuff, and people started paying attention, and then finally somebody stole it, took it to Weymouth. You know, they had to get it back. But anyway, I was asked to look in that too, and the strange thing about that area is that that whole estate was owned by a family called the Popes, who owned Carrier bicycles back in the time, and they lost their son. He drowned right there at the boathouse, and they built the Greek church as a what would you call it? I don't know, a memento to him. And then for those of you who don't know, there's a little tiny cemetery up Green Gate, is that what it's called?
Yep.
Yeah, Green Gate, that's tucked way up behind, I don't know how you can get to it, you have to go.
That roadway that
Ocean
goes up
Ledge.
there.
I only knew about it because my son used to intern with Herb here in the DPW, so he's
Yeah.
like, Mom, we finally found Green Gate, and I'll show you where to get to.
Yeah, right.
That's right, yeah,
Good, yeah.
yeah, so we went up there, so that's, one of the places, but, you know, it's really a little boy, I haven't heard too much about him being there anymore, but it's a sad kind of thing, and, that in a lot of ways, when you think about Cohasset, you know, what is a ghost? Is a ghost somebody that you remember all the time? Is a haunted location someplace that you pass and always remember, like a tragedy? Certainly there's a lot in Cohasset. You know, you go by and you go, oh, that happened, or that happened. So I think that's kind of what's going on there. And then going back to Minot, you know, the Minot light, we decided that we were gonna build this spider steel kind of thing. They work pretty well in the Chesapeake Bay where there's like no gales and no big wind. But they decided they were gonna put one like in Cohasset. How many of you guys tried to sail out of Cohasset Harbor? I did it like once with my husband who didn't know what he was doing. Forget it, almost killed myself. He almost killed us. You get out there, it's serious stuff, very serious stuff. But anyway, there was two light keepers in that structure back in 18, I think it was, let's see, they went down 2 years
51.
after the brig, yep. So, the storm was going on, and the bells were ringing, and they knew they weren't gonna make the night. They took a bottle, and they wrote stuff in the bottle, and they threw it out, and kind of like their wishes, and they said, we know it's not gonna make the night, and so forth. That bottle and that note is over at the Historical Society of England. It's really creepy, but anyway, it went down, and both of them perished, but there's mariners who say that you can hear in a storm them yelling, stay away, you know, or help, or all that kind of stuff, so, again, it's kind of a nasty thing. And then, I live down by Black Rock Beach, so I've been watching Black Rock Beach for a long time. It wasn't until 2 years ago that there was electricity out there. I guess they got a generator. Has anybody ever canoed out to Black Rock Beach, out to Doctor's Island? You know Doctor's Island?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You think you want to live there till you get out there? Oh, yeah, that's, but anyway, so they only just started putting lights out there, but I would see lights, I would see like a figure sometime on the staircase, and I found out years later that, again, during one of these massive gales, it was a really cold one, in New England, some of our worst, you know, hurricanes or storms usually come in the winter, you know, like the blizzard of '78 was the biggest storm we ever had, but it was a blizzard, so you don't think, oh, it was a hurricane, but we've gotten some doozies. But anyway, there was a ship that came in and got caught in that little tiny bay, and it came up against Black Rock, and the boat went like this, and the mast went down on the rock, and the captain and the first mate ran onto the boat, ran down the mast and went onto the island. The next wave picked up the boat and just kind of gently put it onto the shore. But it was in the middle of the night, it was really cold, and so the captain and the first mate were wet, and it was dark, and nobody knew they were there, and they froze to death, so they say that they're still out there, which is kind of spooky. And then the last one that I hear about is, I was just looking up, I hear a lot of people talking about the ghost of the boy on the bike at the intersection of 3A and Beechwood. People have seen him a lot. And I'm not surprised, that is a nasty intersection, so I don't know whatever's happened with that, but one of the things I was hoping we'd do tonight is after I talked, then maybe you would share what you've seen or what you've heard, and I can enrich myself and what's going on based on what you've experienced or what you've heard. So I guess at that point we'll go for questions. How's that sound? Or cake? Do we go for cake?
I'll make a comment. You were talking about the lighthouse keepers. For Minot, I lived in New Bedford, Massachusetts for a while, and to this day, Portuguese sailors will tell you, don't go near Minot's light.
Wow.
I have another, actually, story. It's not a ghost story, but a few years ago, a couple came up to my house, knocked on the door. I wasn't there, my husband was there. And they said, we have relatives, a father and son, that lived, they were lighthouse keepers for Minets, and they lived here in the 1840s maybe. And they left because they were so terrified to be out there. They said, this thing is going down. And so they quit the job, they left, and
I think I've heard that. Yeah, it rocked, it swayed, the night it went down, they talked about it was just going, you know. And now they've got out there a giant granite thing, which if you ever see it get hit by waves, you wonder how it can withstand stuff, but I guess that's the difference between wrought iron and, you know, metal or whatever that thing was, so. Again, don't always trust, your local, building stuff.
How do you feel now that you've been doing this for a while? Are you afraid if you sense something, or are you just sort of, like you said, when you heard that noise, you were frightened, but like now that you're.
Usually if I go into it with like the mindset that I'm looking around or I feel stuff, I'm okay. What I don't like, I don't know. I have a very high startle reflex, so I'm very sensitive. I don't like to be touched, but the worst things that have happened to me is being touched. So there was the one in my house, but I'll tell you another one that just really freaked me out too. So my mother was very ill, and she had gone from hospital to assisted living, and she was going into a nursing home. So she'd been living in this assisted living for 2 years, and so she had a lot of stuff. You know how assisted living, you decorate it, you get all the stuff. So she'd already been put into the rehab nursing home, so we had to start packing her stuff and getting her furniture. So I have 3 brothers. They'd come in, move stuff. So the only thing that was left was my mother's clothes, and my brother said, okay, you guys can take care of the clothes. So this was down outside New Haven, where I'm from. So I come down for the weekend, so I can't stay at the nursing home. So I was like, okay, I'll stay at the assisted living. So I'm in the assisted living, and there's nothing in the space anymore except for what's in the closet. And it was like an ethereal kind of thing. The walls were light, the curtains were light. I swear to God, however it goes. But anyway, I'm sleeping, and all of a sudden something pulls the covers back, gets up underneath me in the bed, and like, ugh, like touches me, you know. And of course I just can't keep moving into the bathroom. But you know, there is a certain kind of ghost that comes into the bed that's called the incubus. That's the male ghost. The female ghost is called the succubus. But I just feel it was like an old man who was like, one night. Or maybe he'd been there before, I don't know, but it freaked the hell out of me. I just don't like it, you know? So, but I also too, I always tell the story, I grew up with my parents who were always dragging me around, and you know, you can't cry, and you know, grow up, there's no such thing. And my parents were of the age that, I don't know, they were rumored to be swingers, but anyway. In some kind of place, my younger brother and I are as tight as thieves, and my parents were like, okay, so you guys are gonna go to bed at 8 o'clock, we'd be like in a tent somewhere, and then they'd be like way over here, and we'd be scared to death to try to make it from the tent to where my parents were. We'd get no sympathy, but you know, it was one thing after another, so I was always kind of scared. I don't know. Probably because I was sensitive. Go ahead.
So one thing that you did not mention that I have heard several ghost stories about, well, we both have, is Bia. There is,
Bia.
yeah.
Interesting. Oh, yeah. Well, that's, what's his name's home? That's Samuel Bates. Yeah, so Samuel Bates's house. So how's it go? So you got the John Wilson, Captain John Wilson's house, and then across the street is Bates' house. That's still an old, untouched house. I forget how it goes, if they're related somehow, but for some reason, the Captain Wilson house has Samuel Bates's clock in it, which you have to go see. So I don't know too much about it, but I know that is an old structure. What have you heard?
I think, don't
Well,
they wear
the
robes?
wait staff talks about it constantly, that there's a little, is it a boy?
Yeah.
There's a little boy who plays tricks in the restaurant on people and like turns lights on and off. And then when they put that new bathroom in, like the door would open and close.
And it would lock people in.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There was also one waitstaff who claimed that she got a phone call from the restaurant at like midnight and nobody was there, it wasn't staffed, it was completely shut down. She called and nobody answered right away, so what else?
Yeah.
But there's the, I missed the beginning, sorry, so if you already talked about this, but the whole idea that, certain entities display themselves as children, and so there's the one running around upstairs above Via all the time, they say, moving furniture when they're in the middle of a meeting.
Yeah, children, I think, there's a theory too, that when children pass away, they don't really have the mental capacity to understand what happened, so they're like, so I'll just amuse myself while I'm by myself. But strangely enough, I don't know that much about the history of that building, but across the street at the Wilson House, if you ever go in there, so downstairs, Captain Wilson was conducting business, right? Upstairs, he had his wife and 11 kids.
Yeah.
Okay, 11 kids. There's like a kitchen, a formal living room, and like a back hallway that kind of has a master suite. And then like, okay, where'd you push all these kids? They must have been on the street, right? Because how did you deal with that kind of thing? So that could typically be it. Go ahead.
I don't know if this is anything, but we live in a house that's 1780 around the corner. It's on the Heritage Trail. And I'm only thinking of this now because you said that apparitions or ghosts are attracted to closet areas, and because my daughter, my eldest daughter, used to sleep in one of the bedrooms upstairs, and she says, without any hesitation, that the closet in that room has a spirit in it. And she says she can't stand it, and she used to hate sleeping in that room. And it's funny, the old doorknob doesn't quite shut, it always opens and closes, you have to wedge it, but all the other ones with the old doorknobs close.
Interesting.
This one won't stay closed.
That's very
So
interesting.
I just thought, you're just a kid's imagination, but.
Yeah, they believe that ghosts travel in portholes, either through staircases or through like these tunnels. I'll give you another crazy story. This has nothing to do with Cohasset, but if you want to have some fun, how many people are familiar with Middleborough, Mass?
Yeah.
Has anybody ever seen a Middleborough Town Hall?
Yes, and then too.
What's that all about?
They have lots of stuff there.
First of all, you ride up on it and you're like, what is going on? Okay, it's a Greek temple on the bottom, and then it's like a federal monument on the top, and then it goes to the ceiling. So it's just like spooky central, and it's in the middle of this square that it's surrounded by churches, and if that wasn't bad enough, then I think the Masons decided they were gonna put the Compass Rose in a big thing out front in the park, right? Compass Rose is the same thing as the pentagram for, a lot of spiritual stuff going on with the Masons, the witches, the this and kind of stuff. But we went down there with the paranormal team afterwards. It was one of the funnest inspections. It was just absolutely nuts. But anyway, when we went down there for the investigation first, there was a horrific lightning storm, and they were always saying, oh, the building's always getting hit, but don't worry, it's got a big thing on top. So anyway, I usually would go in and do all the photography, because I did 143 TV, I was going to do a whole series on this. So I would go in and film, and I would get the feeling, and I would set things up, and wait then for the team to come in, and the last would be the psychics that would come in, so then we would see if the psychics and what they were reading were lining up with like the historical facts and so forth. But anyway, that building was rocking and rolling, and there's also these crazy staircases. You gotta see it, it's fun. If you like spooky stuff, just go down there, it's like, but I was walking down the staircases with one of the psychics, and the both of us heard something. We turned around, and we saw for a second like this guy from 1880. He's like, okay, what's this about? So it turned out, we were pretty sure it was haunted, and then another, we gave our findings, but, not everybody wants us to come down and give a whole report. But we got followed by another group that lived in Middleborough, and the employees were saying, oh, there's this guy, everybody sees this guy, who's this guy? So the paranormal people gave 3 historical pictures, and they went around to the employees, and they said, is one of these guys the ghost? Is one of these guys the ghost? And they all picked this one guy, who's the guy that we saw. That's the guy who built the building, okay? And he built the building with in mind that he would travel through the porthole through lightning.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so he comes and goes through lightning. And I don't know, he missed a couple of years ago because he hit the church next door and blew it. Blew the top off of that church, it got fixed. But it was like crazy, and that's got a jail in the basement too. And Middleborough had a lot of historical stuff. There was a big outbreaking, kind of like not a massacre, but some kind of crazy fight right on those grounds. And, you know, again, if you believe in ghosts, that there's a lot of imprints where people, and now, you know, they talk about, I've always been a big fan of physics, because I think physics and ghosts and all that kind of stuff. So they talk about particle entanglement, right? So you leave behind some particles and they get tangled with the dirt, and pretty soon you got a spot. And I know that sounds crazy, but things are starting to expand. And put another plug in for a book if you want to read some, you know, modern stuff about, you know, ghostly stuff that's outside the realm of our thinking. Read this book, Secret Life of Trees, How Trees Talk. Yeah. Read this book, and then don't let anybody in Cohasset cut down any trees, okay? 'Cause they're all cutting down trees, but this is about how trees talk. So if we can talk about ghost talk, there's more going on, I think, out there than, you know, than we know. Go ahead.
Have you heard of any stories about the old retreat on Jerusalem Road, or one of the Italian houses on Atlantic?
I haven't. I don't, you know, people know of me, but they don't always call me in. You know, again, they hear stories, I go in, but I would love to collect stuff. I don't know if you're talking about, are you talking about the Italian Renaissance that was the women's?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Yes,
St.
that
Joseph's.
too.
Yeah. I haven't heard too much about that, except that I hear it might go down. Is that gonna happen? Is it going down? I hope it's not going down. I don't know. I know that the wife owns it and the husband owns the house across the street. You know, so I hope she keeps it, because it's such a cool looking building. And that's the problem too, just like this one over here. So that'll go down, and there'll go all the stories of the Cohasset Ripley Road.
So
But
do
anyway.
the ghosts disappear when the house goes down, or?
Yeah, because I believe, again, with the particle physics, that they leave whatever particles are inside the building, so they can kind of meld with them. And some will say, like, this is a good book, I probably have at the library, this is pretty basic books about seeing ghosts and different kinds of ghosts. And I think he's really old now, but he used to have a television show, plus he's consulted on a lot of the spooky stuff. But he talked about ghosts having different purposes, and one ghost was the historical ghost, whose job was to kind of maintain and perpetuate and try to keep things in place to pass history along, you know. There's other ghosts, there's the inspirational ghost, there's the healing ghost, there's the protecting ghost, so that'd be something interesting to read.
So what was your final report on Town Hall?
So Town Hall has 3 ghosts in it, okay? So they have the poltergeist who was a prisoner, very old guy. I mean, when you think about how cold and poor and destitute you could be in like 1850, you know, with nothing going on. And so the feeling was he was very poor, so he ended up in the jail for stealing, had nothing going on for him, miserable guy, hung himself in the jail cell, and now lives down there and doesn't want to be bothered. So when I was in that building that night, things were, he was a poltergeist. Things were falling off shelves, things were zipping around, you know, our cameras would go off. One of the leaders of the team was very charismatic. He would do that kind of stuff that they used to do with ghost hunters. Do you want to talk? Do you want to tell us stuff? You know? And so they kind of cornered him into a room in the basement, and whatever this thing came flying out, it felt like, and my camera just, the lights like blew. You could feel it go by. So that's one. There's they say that there's a female entertainer. If you go, again, Cohasset Town Hall, I love the building, I'm like its biggest fan, although, you know, people say you're crazy. But, you know, it was the home of the Yale Summer Stock, that later became the South Shore Music Circus. So underneath it is a whole set of dressing rooms, and a beautiful stage, and a stage with staircases that go in the back where one of the ghosts hangs out. And crazily enough, the greatest American ghost story ever written that turned out to be a play was debuted on the Cohasset Town Hall stage before it was taken to Boston for critical acclaim, and that was Thornton Wilder's Our Town. So if you haven't read that book, that book changed my life, because that will freak you out. And then I had my television show named Our Town after that. So she's back there. I never felt her too much. But then the ghost that I don't want to spoil you about is an interactive ghost. He's a former sewer commissioner, was Cohasset's first sewer commissioner. He doesn't want you in the building. He's very protective of the building. If you get in there, he wants to know what you're doing, especially after night, so he follows you around. He follows you around. And so it's like,
Like,
what?
how long ago did he pass?
Oh, he died in like 1880. Yeah, yeah. So his name was Tower. I think it was Thomas Tower. So, but we would do the tours in there. We'd say, okay, get in there, and then, you know, people, what'd you find out? People like, ugh, I don't know. There was something like, ugh, walking around following us. But it's fun. Go in there in the middle of the day. It's the craziest building, and it's also, they had the one renovations. Then they decided to flip the building. They had the offices downstairs, and then they had the stage upstairs, and then they said, no, let's flip it, and then they flipped it, and then they added some stuff. But that building has also been the jail, the almshouse, the library, the elementary school. It's been everything. And then the last thing they did was add the 1987 edition, which is a disaster. Give a little plug in there, because it's not sound, it is not waterproof, and it's in worse shape with mold and so forth. And I always make a plug. You get this beautiful historical building. I know it's going to cost a lot of money, but currently there's no even sprinkler systems in it. So at any moment, Cohasset Town Hall could just blow up in flames. I don't know. I'm gonna, say, let's pay for it. Hopefully we can find a cheaper way, or maybe a big donor will come to Cohasset. All right, any other thoughts? Yes.
Yeah, our cousin Robert Frazier was one of those ones that was in the ship's chandlery when they were having a meeting.
Really?
And he heard the footsteps upstairs, and the lady asked Robert to go upstairs and check it out. He was sitting on the stairway, which is the only way up. He said it was dark, but the street light was on, and so we could look around, and there was nobody there. So he said, nobody's up there. So and I guess that broke up the meeting, because it kept going back and forth. And then they called Hans Holzer to come in and.
Yeah, I can't. Oh, and that's, how it is. So if you think, oh, somebody's there and then they're not there, maybe you've seen a ghost.
Yeah, I think Jackie Dormitzer mentioned that in one of her books.
Yeah, and so did, David Wadsworth.
Right,
Yeah.
David, yeah.
Yeah, David Wadsworth. There's a bunch of these.
Yeah.
The historical society, so that was a big deal. So that brings people down here. And then they have been trying to get in here forever. This is what Cohasset. Cohasset is such a great place. I love Cohasset. There is a, just so you know, there's either a curse or a rumor that you can never leave Cohasset. So far, I've seen it's true. But anyway, the famous television show, with Taps, the Ghost Hunters, have been trying forever to get into Cohasset Town Hall. I feel like they always followed us around, because they followed us into 3 of the investigations I saw. But anyway, so they would call Cohasset and say they'd like to come in, but they would want to come in April. Big TV show, millions of viewers, all those kinds of. Cohasset would be like, it's during town meeting season. We're too busy. So they've rejected them 4 times. Otherwise, which might be a good thing. Otherwise, we'd be on a national television show and there'd be people walking around with their EFBs on. So call me. Well, and there's a friend of mine who did one of the investigations in the Maritime, and the Wilson Houses does the annual Salem, USA Salem. So if you're interested in watching a paranormal investigation, they invite the public in. Now, of course, it's for a fee, but you can go into that ship and.
That's a creepy ship.
Yeah, it's
It is
kind of a
a
creepy
ship.
ship. Yeah. Well, that ship, you know, was a hospital ship, and it kind of is like on the same theory as some of the most haunted places are like the sanitariums,
Yeah.
and hospitals.
Usually real puppy vendors.
Yeah. You know, so anywhere there's any kind of suffering, and then, you know, there's that whole ice and dead people thing that, you know, were they insane or were they haunted and all that kind of stuff, so.
Have you gone out to the fort in Boston Harbor Island?
Yes.
I remember at one point, a Boston Globe reporter was just reporting on the island, and I remember, I think I saw the picture online. He said, I have no explanation, it was just a picture of a dark, deep tunnel, which they have in there, and there's this light squiggle, and he's like, I checked my camera, and there's nothing, but, you know, for what it was worth, he's like, just kind of added to the lore of the whole place.
Well, is that the lady in black?
Yeah.
I think he had mentioned that.
Yeah, that's a sad story. So they've been talking about that forever, which again is tragedy. People have seen her, but that fort during the Civil War held Southern people. You know, they would ship them up here. Gotta love this woman. So she's like, I'm going to get my husband. I just not gonna put up with it. You know, Southern women are that way. So she comes to the hall and she rents a boat. She dresses like a sailor and she rows over there. Can you imagine what her arms look like? And she gets off the boat and supposedly she finds them in the tunnel because they could communicate by whistling, which is something people in the deep south would do bird calls or, you know, that kind of stuff to communicate. So she finds him and she gets him out of the jail cell and they're trying to escape. She's got a gun. Somebody had given her a gun or she bought a gun. So just as they're escaping, some guard comes along and says, hey, you know, what are you doing? And she takes the gun out to shoot this guy chasing him, and the gun misfires and shoots and kills her husband. Yeah, so that's a true story, and then they hung her. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. And that also over there, you've got the famous story of Shadwell the Ghost, because, you know, there was a family, one of the first light keepers over there back in the day when they had slaves. So there was a ship that came in between Boston Light and Long Island, and so they rowed out to have dinner on the boat, and on the way back a gale came and started, you know, making the seas. So the slave came out to try to rescue him, and he perished. The little girl who was very close to him, there was one little girl left behind, and the slave's name was Shadwell, and they say that you can hear her crying, Shadwell, you know, because he drowned out there. So, and that whole island too, you know, you've got that was, I guess, an institution out there before it was a shelter, and then it was AIDS, and I think that's where the Thompson Island, the leprosy, you know, if you came in from Boston and you had, you know, any diseases, they kind of, you can go live on this island.
Yeah.
You know, suffering out there too. But Boston's a great place. You know, again, if you like ghost stories, go on the ghost tours, because you get the histories, you get a lot of good stories, it's a lot of fun. So Boston's got a good one, Newport's got a great one. I've heard the one about New Bedford, spooky stuff in New Bedford. One down there, Fall River's got a good one, because of course.
Plymouth does a good one also.
Oh, yeah, Plymouth, that's right, I've heard of that, okay. And Nantucket's got a good one? Yeah, and then other cities too, like New Orleans has a great one.
Cape May, Gettysburg,
Oh,
would be fantastic.
Oh, yeah, don't even get me going on Gettysburg.
Oh, yeah, Salem.
Oh, Salem, of course, yeah, Salem. Yeah, I'll be in Salem next week and I have to go every year, just to soak up the energy up there.
I wanna go with her.
All right, any more questions? Well, you guys have been great. Oh, no more?
Rock and the little girl statue house.
Okay, is that the one that
There's
there's,
currently no house on it.
but there's a baseball,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, you know, the Cohasset, Conservation Trust just bought that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You don't
so
know
they-
any of
I don't know anything about that, I know there was one really tragic fire in town, I hate to talk about something that I don't know if it's,
That was on North Main Street.
yeah, oof.
No, a friend of mine took piano lessons at that house that you're talking about, and she said that she always had an uneasy feeling, and she'd be sitting waiting for the piano teacher to come into the room, and there was a rocking chair. And I just was with Katie yesterday, and she was talking about, she's like, the rocking chair used to move, and she'd be sitting there, she was like 8, like,
Growing up, we always heard that was a haunted house,
Yeah.
and
and then it burned
it
down.
burned down a couple times, there were a couple
Yeah,
different
I think
houses that
so.
burned down.
Yeah, in that same spot.
I have to take a look, I have to go back to the historical society and pull out all the books.
Mm.
A few episodes